This happened about 7 or 8 years ago. I was a single mom living on a small island in southeast Alaska. There were only about 26 miles of road, so you could drive from one end to the other pretty quickly. It was a cold, dark Friday night, and the town was calm like most evenings there. My child and I were supposed to fly to Seattle for a long weekend, and we had been looking forward to the trip all week. I worked all day, feeling tired but excited. Then I picked up my child, grabbed our bags that we had packed earlier, and drove to the small island airport to catch our flight. Our flight to Seattle was canceled, so we changed our tickets to the first flight the next morning and started driving back home around 8:30 p.m. The sky was dark by then, and the roads were quiet. I should also mention that at that time I didn't like using cell phones and didn't own one yet.
Do you know Hobby Lobby has hundreds of incredible products on sale every single week? Just check out our weekly ad to discover unbelievable.
But after what happened that night, I finally decided to get a phone. Now we lived about 14 miles north of town, along a mostly empty stretch of road with trees on both sides. I was tired from working all day and frustrated about the canceled flight, so I was probably driving a bit faster than I normally would. The car felt like it was just gliding through the dark road. About 3 miles before we reached home, I came up behind a dark-colored pickup truck that was driving slower than me. So I slowed down too, but I still ended up a bit too close to its back bumper. I didn't mean to be rude or pushy. I was just tired and wanted to get home. I thought about passing the truck, but then I noticed the solid yellow line on the road and realized it was a no-passing zone, so I stayed behind it. It seemed like the driver thought I was following too closely, because they slowed down even more, almost to a crawl, and then pulled over to the side of the road. People sometimes do that on the island, since there's only one main road and faster cars need to get by. I pressed the gas, drove around the truck, and continued toward home, thinking that was the end of it. But as soon as I passed, the truck suddenly sped up again and came right up behind me, almost stuck to my back bumper like they were now the one tailgating me. Then suddenly the driver turned off their headlights. Now I couldn't see the truck in my mirror at all, just darkness behind us. I could still feel that they were there, but I didn't know how close. My heart started beating faster, so I pressed the gas and increased my speed a little, hoping I could put some distance between us, and maybe they would stop following. Out of nowhere, the headlights came back on again, bright and blinding, and I saw that the truck was only inches from the back of my car. It felt like they were almost touching us. At this point, my preteen daughter started to get really worried and slowly turned around in her seat, looking out the back window. I could see her face in the mirror. She looked scared and confused, watching the truck stick to us in the dark. It was very dark, and there were no streetlights, so we couldn't see anyone inside the truck, which made everything feel even creepier. The driver kept turning their headlights off and on several times. Every time the lights came back on, the truck was still right behind me. Soon we were getting close to the road, where we had to turn off the main highway into our neighborhood. I put on my turn signal and hoped the truck would keep driving straight. But when I turned, the truck turned too. Our street was only about 3 blocks away, but I really did not want to turn onto our dark little road with this angry truck still right behind us. There were no streetlights where we lived, and the houses were spread out, so if something happened, no one would see it easily. This was Alaska, and I knew that almost everyone owned a gun, and people could carry them. That thought made me even more scared, because I had no way to call for help, and my daughter was in the car with me. So I decided not to turn onto our street. I kept driving straight past it, pretending like that was my normal route. I tried to keep my voice calm and told my daughter that everything was okay. that we were just taking a different way home, even though inside I was very worried. Less than a mile from our house, there was a big elementary school that we knew well, and I started thinking about heading there because it was more open, closer to town, and felt a little safer than our neighborhood road. The school's driveway and parking lot stay open until 10 p.m., so students and people from the neighborhood can use them. After 10 p.m., the gate is closed and locked. I decided to drive straight to the school because there are often people there, even around 8:30 at night. I drove up the long driveway and into the school parking lot. There were 3 or 4 cars parked there, but I didn't see anyone outside. I chose a spot between some cars and parked directly under a bright street light. The truck followed us up the driveway, but it didn't come into the parking lot. It stopped and stayed back instead. The truck stopped in the middle of the driveway, right at the entrance to the parking lot. It felt like the driver was blocking the way on purpose. They turned off their headlights and just sat there in the truck. We stayed in our car and waited, hoping the truck would leave or that someone would come out of the school. And we waited about 15 minutes. Then the truck finally turned its headlights back on and drove down the driveway toward the main road. We felt very relieved, but I still decided to wait another 5 or so minutes, just to make sure they were really gone. We were very tired, and we hadn't even eaten dinner yet. My stomach was starting to hurt from hunger, and my daughter kept asking when we could go home. So I finally started the car and decided to leave the school parking lot. Our house was only a few blocks away, so I thought it would be safe now. We drove slowly toward the exit of the parking lot. The area was quiet, and the night felt still. When we reached the end of the school's driveway, I stopped, looked both ways, and then turned right toward our home. I checked the road and didn't see any other cars anywhere. But the second my car finished the turn, bright headlights suddenly switched on right behind us. The truck had not left at all. The driver had been hiding just behind the driveway gate with their lights off, waiting for us to come out. My daughter saw it too, and went silent. As soon as our car came out of the driveway, the driver turned on their high beams and rushed right up to my back bumper again. The lights were so bright they filled my rearview mirror and almost hurt my eyes. And to be honest, it really scared me. I'm not someone who gets scared easily, but this felt different. My daughter sat quietly beside me, holding her arms close and looking back at the truck every few seconds. I tried to sound calm for her, but inside I was panicking. I knew I couldn't just keep driving around with this angry driver behind us. This was rural Alaska, and there weren't many bright, busy places or open stores where I could pull in and feel safe. The only little convenience store on that end of the island had already closed for the night, so I knew I couldn't pull in there for help. The roads were empty, the houses were dark, and I started running through my options in my head. Then I remembered that common piece of advice you hear. If someone is following you, don't go home. Go to a police or fire station. That thought felt like a lifeline. The Alaska State Troopers have their main office along the road that leads back toward town. So I took a deep breath, put on my turn signal, and started driving that way. I knew they had security cameras that watched their whole property. My plan was simple: pull right into their lot, park in front of the building, and lay on the horn until someone noticed us. I knew the dispatcher and any troopers inside would be able to see us on the cameras. Thinking about that made me feel a tiny bit safer, and I focused on getting there without making a mistake. I actually knew 2 of the dispatchers who worked there, so heading to the troopers' station felt like the safest choice I had. The truck stayed behind us the whole 7 or 8 miles, never backing off. Every time I checked the mirror, those headlights were still there. When I finally turned into the troopers' parking lot, the truck slowed down. then turned around and drove back the way we had come. They clearly didn't want to be anywhere near the police. That by itself told me a lot about the kind of person I was dealing with. I parked, took a deep breath, and brought my daughter inside. She was shaken and very quiet. I told the troopers everything that happened step by step. We didn't get the license plate number, but I still wanted it on record. I wanted them to know there was someone out there using their truck to scare people. I honestly believe that if I had gone straight home instead, that driver would have followed us right to our house, and things could have ended very differently. Think about it. This person spent over 30 minutes of their Friday night following us, turning their headlights off and on, hiding at the school, and waiting for us to leave. That is not a normal reaction to someone driving a little too close. They must have been really angry, or maybe the kind of person who enjoys scaring others. I don't know what would have happened if we had gone straight home. Maybe nothing, but maybe it could have turned into something much worse. I'm very thankful we didn't take that risk. Going to the troopers' station was the best choice. The next morning, we caught our flight to Seattle like we had planned. Sitting on the plane, I finally felt myself relax. We had a calm, peaceful, long weekend, and I tried to focus on that instead of those bright headlights in my mirror.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than just Peyton Manning. I'm also motivating Manning. When I say insurance, you say financial services. Insurance.
This happened back in 2019, when my partner and I decided to do a road trip across BC, Canada. We rented a car from Vancouver and made a big loop, first heading to Banff, then up to Jasper, and finally back through Whistler. So the whole trip took us about 5 weeks. We kept costs down by sleeping in our car at national park campsites or pulling over at rest stops whenever we got tired. Then one evening, we were driving along the Crow's Nest Highway, somewhere between the small towns of Paulson and Castlegar. The sun was starting to set, and we were looking for a place to stop. That's when we found this provincial park campground just off the highway, and it seemed like the perfect spot to set up for the night. It was a really nice spot right next to a calm lake. There was a big gravel parking area, several wooden benches scattered around, and a covered shelter in case it rained. The only downside was that it felt quite isolated. No towns or houses nearby, just forest all around us. When we pulled in, there were already a handful of other campers there, with their RVs and trailers parked up for the night. We were the only ones with just a tent, which made us feel a bit exposed. We arrived while there was still some daylight left and quickly set up our tent. As we worked, we exchanged friendly hellos and nods with the other campers. Most kept to themselves, but there was this one older gentleman, probably in his late 60s, camping in a decent-sized motorhome. He seemed really eager to chat and kept coming over with questions and stories. Nice guy, but honestly, a bit too talkative for our liking after a long day of driving. He noticed our coffee maker sitting by our tent and got excited about it. He told us he had this massive 5-kilogram bag of coffee beans stored in his motorhome, and we were welcome to take some. But then he said something that didn't quite add up. He mentioned he doesn't actually drink coffee himself, because he can't stand the taste. So why would he be carrying around such a huge bag of beans? It seemed off. He kept insisting we should come into his motorhome to get some, which made us uneasy. So we politely said no thanks. We had enough coffee already. He seemed a bit disappointed, but eventually walked away. After finishing with the tent, we grabbed our camping stove and food supplies and headed to the wooden shelter to cook dinner. My partner and I kept exchanging quick glances while we cooked. We didn't need to say anything. We could both tell neither of us felt right about this guy. Maybe he was just a lonely old man looking for company, totally harmless. Or maybe not. Either way, we decided to keep our guard up. As we were cooking our pasta, we noticed him walking away from his motorhome toward the lakeshore. Probably just going for an evening walk, we thought. A little while later, as we sat eating at one of the picnic tables, we spotted him heading back our way. We quickly looked down at our plates, pretending to be really focused on our meal. We hoped if we didn't make eye contact, he'd just pass by. Even though we were clearly in the middle of our meal, he walked right up and started talking to us again. My partner and I are both the type who hate being rude or creating awkward situations, so we tried to be polite. We kept eating while nodding along and giving short answers to whatever he was saying. I can't remember all the details of the conversation. A lot of it was just random chatter. But certain questions really stood out and made us uncomfortable. He started asking very personal things about our relationship. These weren't just casual, friendly questions. He seemed genuinely invested in the answers and kept pushing for more details. The questions felt way too personal, especially coming from a complete stranger we'd just met at a campground. If a close friend or family member asked these things, it would feel normal and caring. But from this man, it just felt intrusive and uncomfortable. Then he noticed we were drinking water with our dinner and asked if we liked Coca-Cola. He told us he had a whole multi-pack of Coke cans sitting in his motorhome, and we were welcome to take some. But then he added, just like with the coffee earlier, that he doesn't actually drink Coke himself. He doesn't like it. So why on earth would someone keep a full pack of drinks they don't even enjoy? It made no sense, and set off more alarm bells in our heads. We started eating much faster than normal, shoveling food into our mouths so we could finish up. Then we came up with some quick excuse. I think we said we were tired from driving all day and needed to get to bed early. We stood up from the picnic table and started gathering our dishes and cooking gear. It was obvious by now that he wasn't going to take the hint and leave us alone to finish our meal in peace. So the easier option was for us to be the ones to leave. We packed up quickly and headed back toward our tent, leaving him standing there in the shelter. We quickly washed our dishes and cooking pots, then hauled everything back to our car and locked it up. We organized the tent for the night, laying out our sleeping bags and making sure everything was secure. While we were crouched down sorting things out, he appeared again, walking past us on his way back to his motorhome. He stopped and invited us yet again to come grab some Coca-Cola, or even join him inside to watch TV if we felt like it. We politely declined once more, forcing smiles. The sun was setting now, and the light was fading fast. We decided to take a short walk down to the lake, partly to enjoy the evening, but mostly to get some distance from him. We grabbed our toothbrushes and a bag of rubbish, brushing our teeth as we strolled toward the bins at the bottom of the parking area. But as we got closer to the bins in the dim light, we noticed a large, dark figure leaning into one of the garbage containers. The moment it sensed our presence, it suddenly jumped down from the bin, landing on all four legs with a heavy thud. Then it bolted straight for the tree line. My partner and I both froze completely, and there was absolutely no mistaking what we'd just seen. The large, muscular cat-like body, the long, slender tail trailing behind it as it ran. We had just stumbled upon a mountain lion rummaging through the campground garbage. For a few seconds, we just stood there in shock, staring at where it had disappeared into the darkness of the forest. But thankfully, the animal was more frightened of us than we were of it. It had bolted for safety before we'd even fully registered what we were looking at. We both turned around and walked quickly back up the hill toward our car. We agreed right away that we weren't sleeping in the tent that night. We had no idea if the mountain lion was still hanging around in the trees nearby, and we didn't want to take any chances. We got in the car, pushed the seats back as far as they would go and locked all the doors. We tried to sleep there for the night. As we lay there in the dark, we kept thinking about how close we'd just come to a wild mountain lion. With all the excitement and fear from that encounter, we'd completely forgotten about the strange old man in the motorhome. We woke up at dawn before any of the other campers were stirring. We didn't waste any time. We quietly packed up our tent, threw everything in the car, and got out of there as quickly as possible. We drove toward whatever town appeared next on our map, just wanting distance between us and that campground. Fortunately, we didn't run into the strange old man or the mountain lion on our way out. As we drove down the highway with coffee in hand, we talked about the night before. Part of me wondered if maybe we'd overreacted about the old guy. Maybe he was just a lonely pensioner looking for company and conversation. Later that day, while we were driving, my phone rang. It was my brother calling from back home. He sounded worried and wanted to check that we were safe. He told me he'd been watching the news that morning and saw a story about a major manhunt happening in British Columbia. It turned out that 2 men were on the run from police closer to the Alaska border. The authorities were searching the whole region for them. I thanked him for checking on us and assured him we were fine, though hearing this news definitely put us even more on edge after everything that had happened the night before. The 2 suspects didn't look anything like the old man we'd encountered at the campground, but hearing about it definitely made us think harder about his intentions. Looking back on that whole experience now, we still wonder sometimes if we completely overreacted. Was he just a harmless, lonely grandfather trying to make conversation and be friendly with fellow travelers? Or were we actually lucky that night and managed to avoid something far more sinister and dangerous? I guess we'll never really know for sure. But I do believe the important lesson here is to always trust your gut instincts when something feels off or wrong.
My immediate family always hosted Christmas when I was younger. At the time, we lived on the upper level of a 2-family house. My parents owned the house and rented the bottom floor out to multiple tenants throughout the years. Christmas time of 2012, a new tenant had just moved in downstairs. He was a quiet-seeming 30-something-year-old male, and quiet was the kind of tenant my parents were looking for. Unfortunately, a few days into him moving in downstairs, there would be a lot of noises at off hours of the night. Like, for example, the front door would open and shut numerous times throughout the night, and sometimes there would be loud talking, in some instances yelling. My dad went downstairs one night to see what the commotion was, and to ask him to keep the noise down. That was the start of my dad's suspicions about that guy downstairs. Fast forward to Christmas Eve night. We had the whole family over, dining room table stretched out with all 20 seats taken. My Uncle Jake is a heavy smoker, so he goes outside to smoke several times throughout the night. After our main course, Uncle Jake went outside for yet another smoke. He mistakenly left his phone on the table, however, and when it rang a few times after he went outside, my dad ordered me to go run his phone to him outside. So I grabbed his flip phone and ran it down the stairs. However, before I went out the front door, I stopped and noticed the back door was open. See, when you walk into the house, there's a little hallway with 3 doors. One door which led to the downstairs apartment, the front door, and then a hallway that stretched to the back door. The back door was open, so I figured my uncle went out back. The phone was still ringing, so I hurried to the backyard to find my uncle, but he didn't seem to be back there. Just when I was about to give up, I heard someone in the shed, and the shed door was open. I called for my uncle, and someone came out of the shed. It was too dark to see him, but I was pretty sure it was my uncle. He started walking over to me fast. At first, I assumed because he wanted to answer his phone in time, but when he got close enough to the lights from inside of the house, I could see his face. It wasn't my uncle, but rather the tenant from downstairs. For some reason, the way he was approaching me I found intimidating, so I turned and ran for the door. I slammed it in that man's face and went to the front yard, where I found my Uncle Jake smoking. I stood by him and told him about the downstairs tenant, and how he seemingly just charged at me. My uncle is the kind of guy to not really take things I say seriously, or he's just not that kind of person to confront someone. I stayed with him until he finished his smoke because I was uncomfortable. Then we walked back upstairs to the dinner table together, where I told my dad about the tenant in the shed and how he followed me. There was a silence at the table, and my dad seemed a little concerned, but I guess he didn't want to ruin the remainder of our Christmas dinner, so he waited until we were done to check outside. When he came back up, he said the neighbor wouldn't answer his door, but that the shed outside was shut. A couple hours later, the last of our family left, and my immediate family started getting ready for bed. I stayed up in the living room by the fire and tree because I liked the lighting the two gave off. I watched a Christmas movie, and I guess I nodded off at some point while watching it. However, I do remember waking up suddenly from a kind of half-sleep and hearing a creaking on the stairs. I was too tired to move from my laying position, plus I assumed it was just my mom, dad, or sister. Not to mention our giant Christmas tree blocked my view of the stairs. We had all carpeted floors upstairs, so I couldn't hear whoever it was roaming around. But I heard a door down the hall open, probably my sister going back to bed. By now the fire seemed to be almost dead, and the movie I was watching was over. The clock under the TV read 1 in the morning. I figured I'd just stay on the couch at that point because I was so comfortable. A few minutes later, I heard something rustling by the tree. It sounded like an ornament fell off of it. Someone had definitely walked into it. I flipped on my side and looked at the tree, but it was as still as it always was though. I flipped back on my other side, eyes still open, and saw a man standing over me, bending slightly. Of course, initially my first reaction was to scream. My second reaction was to analyze the face to see if it was my father, and when I realized it wasn't my father, rather the downstairs tenant, I screamed even louder. The man tried to cover my mouth, but at that point I think he realized it was too late. Everyone heard me. He ran for the stairs just as my dad stormed out of his room. My dad chased after him, but he was already driving down the street. I think when he was standing over me, he was making sure I was asleep before robbing the place or something. Fortunately for us, my parents had copies of his ID and other important information, which my parents used to find him and sue him for breaking and entering, and we won the case in a landslide. Don't let that take away from the fact that it was still an insanely scary thing to go through. It was Christmas Eve of 2015. I had recently gotten a new job as a psychiatric nurse, but I had to start with the overnight shifts, and that included Christmas Eve night, which was a Thursday. Well, technically it was a Friday by the time I arrived to work. But anyway, most of my shifts are slow and boring, with a lot of sitting around a computer for most of the night, since most of the patients are asleep during the hours that I was there. Occasionally I'd have to check on patients and observe their behavior, or deal with patients who would become restless in the middle of the night. Dealing with so many people with mental disabilities at once was a lot to take in at first, but the Christmas decorations scattered throughout the building brought a little extra cheer to the place. At night, the main lights in the hallways go out and a dim set of lights turn on. These dim lights mixed with the Christmas lights that had been hung up all over the place created a more relaxed, comfortable setting. There was one particular patient who had been creeping me out. Her name was Abatha. She was an old, sickly lady with severe schizophrenia. She oftentimes would mumble to herself incomprehensible things, and sometimes she'd say things out loud that I'd assume were directed at me, but she'd just be talking to herself. It was about 3 in the morning when I went to go check on Abatha, who had been awake the whole night. I came in and asked if she needed anything, and she just looked at me with a horrific smile and laughed. It gave me chills because I felt like I was witnessing something from a scary movie. She looked away from me and started muttering something. I didn't understand most of it, but the words that did pop out to me were, "Check the bathroom." I asked her to repeat herself, but she didn't acknowledge me. She just turned to her side and rested her head on the pillow. I tried to get her to confirm she wanted me to check the bathroom, but she wouldn't answer now. So I checked the bathroom across from her bed in her room, but as I expected, there was nothing out of the ordinary. I left her room and went back to my desk in the hall. Then I looked at the bathroom door across from my desk. My curiosity got the better of me, so I went into the bathroom, but the lights wouldn't turn on. I stood by the doorway listening for a moment, and I heard breathing and then a click sound from one of the stalls. I went to get the door stopper from behind the desk and wedged it under the bathroom door so that the light from the hall would let me see at least a little bit into the bathroom. I got on my knees and checked under the stalls from a distance. No feet could be seen in either of the stalls, though. One stall of the two had its door shut, though. I went up to it and stuck my eye through the crack of the door. It was really dark, but I felt like I could see something at the back of the stall. I got back down on my knees to look under the door, but when I did, I couldn't see what I thought I just saw. I got back up and took one more look through the crack of the door, and there was someone's face right on the other side, peeking through the crack just as I was. I almost fell to the floor in fright, but managed to run to the door and slam it shut. I grabbed the key from the desk and locked the bathroom door. I told another nurse that there was someone in the bathroom, but when we checked together, not only did the lights now work, but the stalls were both open and no one was inside either of them. It was impossible for someone to have left the room. I locked the door. That night, before my shift ended, I tried to question Abatha about what was in the bathroom, but she wouldn't answer me. Just as I gave up and walked to the door with my jacket on, I heard her say, "Merry Christmas." I turned and saw her giving me a smile. Only the smile didn't give me a good feeling. There was something unsettling about it. I had to turn and leave. I had to work with Abatha for a few more weeks before she was transferred to another center for hospice care. To this day, I still feel there was a connection between Abatha and whatever I saw in that bathroom. It's literally just one of those stories I just can't even try to understand or rationalize, but it still haunts me.
When a child is in the hospital, family does whatever it takes to stay. At Ronald McDonald House, we give them a community of support, warm meals, and a place to rest. Because when a child is in the fight of their lives, family stays, and Ronald McDonald House stays with them.
Last year for Christmas, I wanted to do something new with my girlfriend. We just got a new apartment together last year and still live in it to this day. It was our first Christmas in the apartment, however, and neither of us had ever cut down our own tree. So I came up with the idea to go cut down our own tree. Luckily, we live in New Hampshire, so spruce trees happen to grow in our state. My girlfriend Tristan and I took a short road trip on a snowy evening to a forest full of spruce trees. I chose to go while it was snowing because I felt it made the whole experience more Christmassy. I pulled my pickup truck up into what appeared to be a small opening on the side of the road. It was hard to tell given that there was snow on the ground. I heard gravel crunching under the tires as I pulled off the road. It was a perfect place to leave the truck while Tristan and I went to find a tree. We were in a very hilly part of the state, so we had to do a lot of uphill walking. Unfortunately, my girlfriend was complaining a lot. She didn't seem to find our little field trip to be as fun of an idea as I did. We pressed on uphill through the snow, searching for a small enough spruce tree that could fit in our living room. Most of the trees we were finding were too big. Eventually we found that perfect one though, just the right size. I gave the tree one good pat and shake before I lifted the axe I was carrying into the air and began chopping away at the trunk. The trunk was relatively skinny, so after a bunch of good hits, the tree toppled over with one good kick. Of course, I wouldn't be carrying it alone, and I'd prefer not to drag it all the way down the hill through the snow, so I asked Tristan to grab the top end while I grabbed the trunk. Then she suddenly complained that she didn't have gloves. There was an extra pair in the car, I didn't realize she didn't bring them, though. I threw her the keys and told her to hurry back to the trunk and get the gloves. She ran off back down the hill, and I was left alone standing in the middle of the woods, next to the freshly cut tree. Tristan was taking a while, so I sat down on the trunk of the tree and observed my surroundings. Pine trees as far as the eyes can see, which wasn't too far anymore considering it was just about dark now. I turned on the flashlight I brought with me to make it easier for Tristan to find me again. Other than the sound of the wind and tiny snowflakes hitting the ground, it was completely silent. It was actually a little creepy sitting out there all alone. Finally, I heard the sound of boots walking in the snow nearby. I called out in a loud yell Tristan's name and waved my flashlight in that direction. The footsteps stopped, however, and there wasn't a response. I thought she must have been trying to sneak up on me, so I figured I'd turn the tables on her. I placed the flashlight on the stump, aimed it out into the woods, and did the best I could to quietly go hide behind a tree to wait for her to come out. I knelt down behind a big pine tree and heard the footsteps coming closer. Finally, someone came running into the light of the flashlight, and I mean like full-on charging out. But it wasn't my girlfriend. It was some random guy in a coat with a hood covering his head. He stopped and looked down at the flashlight, grabbed it, then turned it off. And now that it was dark again, I could barely see him. Based on the way he charged up to the flashlight like that, I couldn't imagine he meant well. I took one big breath before I started sprinting down the hill back to the car. It made so much noise that I knew he had to have heard it, but I didn't want to turn around and look. When I got about halfway down the hill, I started hearing screams. They were the screams of Tristan shouting out my name in what sounded like a panic. When I got to the bottom of the hill, I started to hear the truck's horn honking. I made it to the truck and jumped into the driver's seat. Tristan was sitting in the car waiting. She screamed at me to drive, but I didn't need to hear it from her to know to do that. As I drove the truck out of that little clearing, we both looked back and saw a man standing where my truck was not even 5 seconds ago, watching us drive away. It was a long drive home, but by the time we got back to our town, we stopped at a Home Depot and picked up a tree there. Never again will we attempt to cut down our own tree.
I signed up for Trunk or Treat because it always felt like the safest way to celebrate Halloween. Cars instead of houses, parents instead of strangers, the whole school parking lot glowing under those harsh floodlights. I teach second grade, so most of my kids were still at the age where a superhero cape could make them sprint in circles.
You can help save the lives of children like Beckett by supporting St. Jude Children's Research.
My little one-bedroom in Raleigh wasn't much, but it was mine, and my shepherd mix Luna made it feel alive. That night started like any other. The neighbors watered their lawns. Somewhere down the block, a kid was practicing drums out of rhythm. I grabbed my takeout, clipped on Luna's leash, and we took our usual loop through the neighborhood. We passed the house with the overgrown magnolia, a couple arguing about sprinklers, the neighbor's old Buick. Normal. The kind of normal that makes you forget anything bad could ever happen. When we reached my front steps, Luna stopped cold. Tail down, hackles up. A sound came from her throat I almost didn't recognize. A low growl she saved for when something was truly off. "Come on, drama queen," I said, giving the leash a tug. But she wouldn't move. When I finally coaxed her forward, a draft hit me the second I opened the door. It was cooler inside, strange for a place that'd been locked all day. Still, I brushed it off. I was tired, and tired nurses explain everything away. Probably the AC, you forgot to close the vent, you're overthinking. I dropped my keys into the bowl on the table and kicked off my shoes. "Luna?" I called. She stayed by the door, staring down the hallway. No wag, no movement. Something about her stillness pressed on me harder than any noise could. "Hello?" I said into the empty house. Nothing. I did a quick sweep. Kitchen, bathroom, closet. Everything looked fine, but my pulse was too aware of itself. Every sound stood out like it had been highlighted. When I reached the bedroom, Luna crept behind me. I flipped the light switch. The room looked exactly the same. Bed made, blinds closed, candle on the nightstand. But Luna lowered herself, belly brushing the rug, eyes fixed under the bed. She growled again, low but constant. "Hey," I whispered, half joking, half begging her to stop. "It's fine. There's nothing." Then I realized she wasn't even blinking. I told myself to laugh, to check, to just prove there was nothing. My knees hit the rug. I lifted the bed skirt. A man's face, inches from mine. He lay flat, cheek pressed to the floor, staring like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. His hand twitched near a backpack. I didn't think. I moved, grabbed Luna's leash, and bolted. The sound of him crawling out from under the bed followed me down the hall. A thud, then footsteps. The back door slammed open as we tore through the front. I didn't feel the ground until I hit the grass barefoot. 911, I gasped into my phone, shaking. By the time police arrived, my whole block was awake. Neighbors standing on porches, lights on in every window. Inside, officers found the bedroom window pried open, lock broken. The backpack was still under the bed. Inside, duct tape, rope, a knife, and a small camera with a dead battery. One of the officers looked at Luna and said, "She probably saved your life." I just nodded. I couldn't look at the bed anymore. I didn't stay that night. I didn't stay any night after that. I packed what I could, took Luna, and crashed on a friend's couch for 3 weeks. Then I found a new apartment and swore I'd never live on a first floor again. But leaving didn't erase it. Every creak in the floor, every noise from the vents, it all came alive. I started sleeping with a flashlight beside my bed and wedges under every door. The first week in the new place, I woke up to Luna pacing at 2 a.m. I sat up, with my heart hammering, but it was nothing. Just the elevator down the hall. Still, I couldn't go back to sleep. People told me, "You're safe now. He's gone." Maybe. But safety doesn't reset just because someone says so. I kept replaying that moment under the bed. His face wasn't monstrous. It was ordinary. That's what stuck with me. Those were the kind of eyes you could pass at a grocery store and never think twice about. It's worse that way. Realizing danger doesn't always look like danger. Police never caught him. They said he'd likely been watching me for weeks, learning my schedule. Maybe he saw me take Luna out every evening, noticed the pattern, and waited. Routine, I've learned, can make you predictable. Predictable can make you prey. After that, I stopped taking the same route home from work. Parked in different spots. Stopped posting when I got off shift. It wasn't paranoia. It was maintenance, like taking vitals on my own life. I changed how I looked at space, too. I used to think home was a place you filled with comfort. Now I think it's something you defend. Luna sleeps near the bedroom door these days. She's older, but every time she lets out that low rumble, I listen. No arguing, no brushing it off. People ask if I ever got another candle like the one I had on my nightstand, the sea salt one I always burned before bed. I didn't. The smell brings it back too clearly. Now I burn cedar. Something solid. Something that smells like it could hold its ground. Sometimes coworkers at the hospital will say, "You live alone? That must be peaceful." I smile and tell them, mostly. They don't know how much meaning that word can hold. I still keep a sticky note on the inside of my front door. It started as a joke, but it's become a rule. Trust the dog. Below it, in smaller writing, I added one night when the silence got too heavy. Trust yourself too.
Think Verizon's best 5G network is expensive? Think again. This season, bring in your AT&T or T-Mobile bill to a Verizon store for a better deal. Then use those unwanted bills to wrap up goodbye gifts to AT&T. Or cut them into snowflakes to celebrate your switch from T-Mobile. 'Tis the season to save at Verizon. Just bring in your bill to your local Verizon store and we'll give you a better deal. Rankings based on Root Metric Root Score report dated 1/2025. Your results may vary. Requires postpaid consumer mobile bill dated within the past 45 days and same name as person redeeming deal. Additional terms apply.
I'm the kind of person who treats showers like concerts. Curtain closed, playlist up, shampoo bottle as a microphone. I know every horror movie says, don't do that. But honestly, the only scary thing about my place was the rent. It was late. I'd been at the art studio for hours, came home covered in charcoal dust, and promised myself a 10-minute shower before crashing. My bathroom was nothing fancy. Tiny, old, but clean. White tiles, a little frosted window that didn't open, a curved shower rod, and a gray and white curtain I'd picked because it looked grown up. Music on, steam up. I stepped in, letting the water drown out the world. Then the curtain brushed my shoulder. I thought nothing of it at first, maybe steam, air pressure, or some weird draft. I laughed at myself. Okay, physics, relax. But a few minutes later, it brushed me again. This time it felt different, like something had moved behind it. I stopped singing and turned off the water. The sudden silence made the room sound smaller. I stood there dripping, listening. No fan running, no open window, just the faint drip of water from the shower head. "All right," I said, not creepy at all. I peeked over the curtain. Everything looked normal. The counter, the towel rack, the mint green bath mat. Nothing out of place. I turned the water back on, but now I was hyper aware of everything. The sound of the rings sliding, the curve of the curtain, the space behind me. When I looked down, I realized the curtain wasn't fully closed anymore. The inner edge hung slightly outward, like someone had pulled it to peek inside. That wasn't from steam. My heartbeat kicked up. I turned off the water again, pushed the curtain flat, and whispered, "It's fine." But I couldn't leave it at that. I slowly pulled the curtain open and found nothing. Just the empty bathroom, warm and fogged with steam. Still, something was off. I stepped out, wrapped the towel too tight around myself, and grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight. Then I saw the window in my bedroom, half open. I froze. I never opened that window. The lock was stiff and needed a shove to move, and I hadn't touched it in weeks. The towel suddenly felt useless. I shut the bathroom door, backed into the hallway, and stared at that open window like it might blink. Then I heard footsteps. Outside. On the stairs. The metal steps that lead to my apartment make a distinct squeak on the second one from the top. I knew that sound. I heard it now. Slow. Steps climbing to my door. I didn't move. The sound stopped right outside. Someone was standing there. No knock. No voice. just waiting. I grabbed my phone and hovered over 911. My hand was shaking and my brain was arguing with itself. Call? Don't call? What if it's just a neighbor? But neighbors don't stand still in silence at your door at midnight. Before I could decide, the shadow under the door moved away. The steps creaked again. Down this time. Then, nothing. I waited a full minute before I exhaled. Then I locked the deadbolt, the chain, and the tiny secondary latch for good measure. I checked the window, still open. I closed it, struggled with the lock until it clicked, then pulled the blinds shut. I didn't sleep much that night. I left every light on, music low, trying to convince myself it was all explainable. Air pressure, my imagination, anything. The next morning, the sun came in clean and warm. Everything looked safe again, normal even. Then I called maintenance. The manager said she'd send someone to check the window. Her voice was cheerful, unconcerned, the kind of tone people use when they don't really believe you. 2 police officers came that afternoon. They were kind but neutral, probably used to paranoid college kids. One checked the lock and said, "This is loose. Someone could open it from outside with a flat tool if they tried." "Did they?" I asked. He shrugged. "Hard to say. You said you heard footsteps?" "Yes." And the curtain moved. That part sounded ridiculous out loud. He wrote it down anyway. They told me to get a better window latch and maybe a door bar for my front door. The older officer said, "You'd be surprised how many people just test handles." That phrase stuck in my head. Just test handles. They left. Maintenance replaced the lock the next day. I bought a wedge for my door and one of those stick-on alarms for the window. For weeks, I couldn't shower without checking every corner of the apartment first. I started leaving music playing in the living room instead of the bathroom, so I could hear if anything else moved. Eventually, I moved to a new place. But I never stopped thinking about that night. I've worked remotely for years, which means my apartment isn't just home, it's my entire world. One room for working, one for sleeping, endless video calls, and coffee refills that never seem to end. I liked it that way. Until the night my laptop camera turned on by itself. It was raining, like it always is in Seattle, tapping against the window while I exported files past midnight. I leaned back in my chair, ready to shut the lid, when the little green LED above my webcam blinked once, just a quick flash, then went dark. It wasn't long enough for a video call, just a flicker. I stared at it for a second and thought, Chrome's being weird again. Restarted. Worked fine. I didn't think much of it. The next night, though, it blinked again. I'd been getting ready for bed, walking past my desk, when that green light winked at me through the darkness. Just once, quick enough to make me question if I'd imagined it. The lock screen glowed. No apps open, no Zoom calls, no alerts. I checked camera permissions. Every app was blocked. Everything looked normal. Still, I couldn't explain it, but it got under my skin. The next afternoon, while reorganizing some assets, I noticed a new folder on my desktop. No name, just a random string of numbers and letters. The timestamp read 3:42 a.m. I hadn't been awake then. Inside the folder were 9 video files. Short clips, 6 to 15 seconds each. The thumbnails looked dark and grainy. When I clicked one, my breath caught. It was a video of me, in bed, asleep. The camera was angled from my desk facing the bed. I watched myself shift under the blanket before the video cut off. I couldn't move for a few seconds. The latest video was from last night, the night the LED blinked while I was getting ready for bed. I unplugged the Wi-Fi router, slammed the lid shut, and called the only person I knew who might actually understand what was happening. My friend Ben. He's a cybersecurity guy. Hoodie, caffeine, a walking firewall. When he answered, I said, "Please tell me webcams can randomly record while closed." "Not unless someone tells them to," he said flatly. "Unplug everything. I'm on my way." He showed up 10 minutes later with a Pelican case full of gadgets and ran every test imaginable. Booted my Mac from an external drive, scanned for unsigned apps, network sniffers, background tasks. When he finished, he looked at me grimly. "You installed something recently?" "Just a Chrome plugin for batch downloading assets," I said. "It was recommended on Reddit." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, about that. Turns out the plugin wasn't what it claimed to be. It had been sold, rebranded, and quietly updated with hidden code that gave remote access to the webcam. It wasn't full-time streaming, just small bursts. Sampling. That's why the clips were short. The weird part, Ben said, is that whoever did this didn't care about your work. They just wanted to know they could see you. He cloned the drive, quarantined the infected files, and took the laptop for deeper analysis. I bought a new one the next morning. Still, that night, the feeling stuck with me, that crawling sense of being observed. I taped over the new webcam, locked my door, and tried to sleep. When I finally woke, I noticed a strange message on my monitor. It said, in block letters, "Cute plant, smile face." My heart stopped. I hadn't written it. I hadn't had anyone over in weeks. My desk plant, a small pothos, was visible in every meeting I had. I joked about it once on a call. Whoever wrote that note had been watching me long enough to get the joke. I tore the apartment apart, checked every closet, every vent, under the bed, inside drawers. Nothing. No hidden cameras. No bugs. Nothing out of place. Except that note. Ben came back later that day. When I showed it to him, he frowned. "You sure you didn't write it?" "Positive." He ran more scans. Nothing new turned up. That night, I left the living room lamp on and sat awake, listening to the building creak. At 4 a.m., the hallway light outside flicked off, then back on. Probably a power blip, but when you're already on edge, everything feels intentional. I didn't sleep again until morning. The next day, Ben texted, "Found the source." The extension connected to a remote server through a second domain. The videos were uploaded, then deleted. Deleted, I typed back. At least locally. Whoever did this already moved them. There'd be no way to know who'd seen them or how many people had access. That thought haunted me. Someone, somewhere, had watched me sleep. And now those clips existed in a corner of the internet that doesn't forget. A few weeks later, I moved apartments. New locks, new Wi-Fi, new everything. I even pointed the webcam toward a blank wall. But the damage was already done. I'd wake up to the hum of the fridge and think it was a recording device. I'd see the green light of my router and feel watched. The rational part of me knew it was over. The rest of me wasn't sure. Because whoever they were, they knew exactly how to look. Months passed before I could even open my old laptop again. When I did, Ben had wiped everything and saved the clean files to an external drive. I thought about throwing the machine away, but decided to keep it. Like a scar you can point to. Then one afternoon, while setting up my new workspace, I noticed something strange. My new webcam light flicked on for half a second. I froze. Then the firewall popped up with an alert. Process attempting camera access. Blocked. It was a trusted app, one I'd used for years. I clicked deny and stared at that little green light until it dimmed completely. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. All I know is I've learned to treat every camera like a door and never assume I'm the only one holding the key. I used to think thunderstorms were cozy, the kind that roll in thick and slow, where rain taps the windows like static and lightning glows behind the curtains. Nights like that made my apartment feel like a little world of its own. Safe, sealed, familiar. That night, I was working late, as usual. Freelance design means your deadlines are yours to suffer through. My lamp cast a soft pool of light across the table, and a mug of half-cold tea steamed lazily beside my laptop. Outside, the rain came in constant sheets. The sky lit up in quick flashes every few seconds, and thunder kept a low pulse. My neighbor across the street, Mr. Ellis, had his porch light on like always. A tiny golden landmark across the wet dark. Then, in one heartbeat, everything in my apartment went black. Not the street, not the houses next door, just mine. The first flash of lightning proved it. Everyone else's lights stayed on. Mine were the only ones out. I gave a little nervous laugh. Okay, breaker. No big deal. I grabbed my phone for light. The storm outside kept flashing like a malfunctioning camera, but inside it was dead silent. Even the fridge hum was gone. The breaker box was in the basement. I hated that basement. It was narrow, unfinished, and had this constant damp smell that even bleach couldn't fix. But I'd gone down there dozens of times before. It wasn't scary. It was just old. Still, something about the house felt different. The air was thicker. It's hard to explain, but it felt different, like someone else had already been breathing it. When I reached the kitchen, my light caught the basement door, and my stomach dropped like a stone. It was open. That door was always latched. Always. It had this tiny hook and eye lock that liked to rattle when the wind hit the back steps. I kept it closed for peace of mind, but now it hung open. Probably the wind, I thought, knowing full well the wind can't unlatch metal. Still, I pushed the door wider and called down, "Hello?" Nothing. Just the muted hiss of rain through the walls. I told myself I was being ridiculous and started down. The air got colder the farther I went, and that basement smell, wet cement and old detergent, was sharper tonight. And underneath it, gasoline. Faint, but there. I swung the light around. My dehumidifier sat unplugged, its cord stretched across the floor. A few other cables, my surge protector, and extension cord were dragged toward the little window near the ceiling. It looked like someone had been pulling them from outside. A nervous chuckle slipped out. That's not possible. But when I reached for one, it shifted slightly, like it had been resting under tension. The prongs were halfway out of the socket. I pushed it back in. My hands felt clumsy. That's when my phone light flickered. Just a pulse. But it was enough to send a jolt through my chest. Then lightning flashed through the basement window, bright enough to light the whole room. And in that flash, I saw something outside. A shape, like a shoulder moving past the glass. I held my breath, waited for another flash, but it didn't come soon enough, and I wasn't about to stand there counting seconds. I turned toward the stairs and froze halfway up. Light. From above. The living room lamp was on. I hadn't touched it. A second later, footsteps. Slow, solid, unmistakably human. I couldn't make myself move. My brain was blank noise. The footsteps crossed the living room, into the hallway, then stopped over the kitchen. Right above me. I backed down the stairs, phone trembling in my hand. I crouched behind the furnace, gripping the phone tight enough to make it creak. My breath sounded huge. The light upstairs clicked off. I don't know if it was real or if my ears filled in what I feared, but I swear I could hear someone standing by the basement door, just listening. My thumb found 911. Columbus Police, what's your emergency? I kept my voice low. Someone's in my apartment. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly. Where are you right now? In the basement. The door's open. They're upstairs. Stay on the line, she said. Officers are on their way. Can you see or hear them now? I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. Upstairs, something moved again. A faint clink, like a glass touching the counter. Then slow steps toward the front door. The latch clicked. The door opened. The rain got louder for a moment, and then the door shut. Silence. The dispatcher kept me talking until I heard the sirens. When the officers arrived, I told them the key was on a hook by the washer, and they came through the bulkhead door. When they found me behind the furnace, one of them said softly, "You're safe now." But that word didn't fit. They searched every room. The windows were shut, but on the kitchen counter, my water glass had been moved closer to the edge, and the latch to the basement door was twisted sideways, bent slightly, like someone had grabbed it too hard. Outside, near the breaker box, the rain had turned the soil into dark mud. One officer crouched beside it, shining his light. "Boot prints," he said. Half-washed, but clear enough. Whoever it was had been standing there in the storm, close enough to touch the side of the house. They took a report, told me to stay somewhere else if I could. I said I would. I didn't. I told myself I'd just keep every light on until morning, and I did. I sat on the couch and just kept looking at the empty space by my window, expecting movement that didn't come. The officers had left their card, but there wasn't much they could do. Maybe a power surge, they'd said. Except surges don't unlatch doors or leave footprints. That afternoon, I went outside to see the breaker box for myself. I hadn't really looked at it in daylight before. The lock was still there, but scratched, like someone had tried to pry it with a tool. That night, I didn't turn off a single light. I texted a friend, said I was fine. I wasn't. The next few days blurred. I went through motions: work, grocery store, dishes. A city electrician stopped by the following week to fix a neighbor's wiring. I asked him how hard it would be to cut power to one unit without affecting the rest of the street. Depends on the setup. These old places? Easy if you know where the service disconnect is. Could someone outside the building do it? He smiled like it was a weird question. Sure, if they know what they're doing. That answer sat heavy for the rest of the day. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way the back steps creaked 2 beats after I used them, as if they were catching up. The way the motion light sometimes didn't trigger until I was halfway across the yard. Small things. Maybe nothing. But once something cracks your sense of safety, everything echoes through it. I moved 6 months later. Not far, just to a newer building with sealed windows and an indoor breaker box. I told people I wanted more sunlight, but the truth was simpler. I wanted fewer explanations that started with maybe. Still, sometimes during storms, I'll look at the walls and imagine the power cutting again. I'll picture that window, that pulled cord, those boot prints half erased by rain. And every time, I get the same thought. How easy it was for one person to reach through the walls of my life and flip the world off, like a switch. I don't love storms anymore. I still admire them, but I don't relax. It was a Tuesday night, late summer. The kind of quiet evening that feels safe just because it's boring. I'd finished a long shift at the dental office and was sprawled on the couch with a plate of reheated pasta, letting some forgettable Netflix show fill the silence. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt to have the apartment to myself. My roommate was out of town visiting family, and I actually liked the silence. No small talk, no clinking dishes, no background noise except the hum of the fridge and the soft hiss of the swamp cooler. Around 10:30, I muted the TV for a second to check my phone, and then I noticed it. A strip of light glowing under the bathroom door. The problem was, I hadn't been in there since I took a shower before dinner. The light had been off. I was sure of it. For a moment, all I could do was stare, hoping for some sign it wasn't what I thought. Maybe I'd left it on earlier without realizing. Maybe the bulb flickered on somehow, faulty wiring or something. Still, I'd lived there 3 years. That light never turned itself on before. I called out just to be sure. Hello? Nothing. I tried again, half laughing at how ridiculous I felt talking to a closed door. Hey, anyone in there? The light clicked off, instantly. Then came the sound of metal sliding into place. The lock turning. My first thought was that it had to be a trick of sound. Maybe the neighbors, maybe the pipes. But no, the bathroom was 10 feet away, and the click was clean. I sat there frozen, watching the dark strip where the light had been. I stood up slowly, trying to keep my movements quiet. My heartbeat felt too loud in my ears. I grabbed the remote and muted the TV completely. Silence. No footsteps, no water running, no sound at all from behind the door. The door was closed tight. I reached out, hesitated, and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No breathing, no movement, just stillness. I backed away, grabbed my phone from the couch, texted my roommate, "Hey, did you leave the bathroom light on before you left?" No reply. He was probably asleep, 2 time zones away. I turned on the hallway light just to have something between me and the dark. My mind ran through every possibility. Maybe someone had broken in earlier while I was at work and had been hiding. The lock sound made sense if they were trying to keep me out. But then, why turn the light on? After 5 minutes of silence, I decided I needed to know. I grabbed the heaviest thing in reach, an old umbrella stand, and knocked. Hard. "Whoever's in there, I'm calling the cops." Silence. Then a sound I still can't fully describe. Not movement exactly. More like a faint scrape, something brushing the tile floor. That's when I called 911. The dispatcher told me to leave the apartment immediately and wait for officers outside. I grabbed my keys, slipped on my shoes, and bolted out the front door. I remember my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone once on the steps. 2 police cars arrived in minutes. They searched the apartment top to bottom. Every closet, every cabinet. The bathroom door was still locked from the inside. One of the officers forced it open. There was no one there. The small window above the shower was cracked open, just enough for someone to squeeze through, if they were small and desperate. The curtain was half pulled, and on the floor was a single wet footprint, bare, angled toward the window. Whoever it was had been in there quietly, long enough to wait until I noticed. They dusted for prints, but didn't find anything useful. The officer said it looked like the intruder came in through the same window and must have been hiding, maybe since earlier that day. They couldn't say how long. Nothing was stolen. Not a thing. My wallet, laptop, everything was untouched. That somehow made it worse. Because if they didn't break in to take anything, then what did they want? For weeks afterward, I couldn't sleep without every light on. Every creak made me tense up. I replaced the bathroom lock and nailed the window shut, but I still found myself staring at that door whenever I passed it. Even now, years later, I still live with the habit. I check the bathroom every night before bed. Once you see light under a door that shouldn't be on, you don't ever trust darkness the same way again. If you also thought the scariest part wasn't being alone,